and where you were born.
All right. My name now is Miriam Rabin. My maiden name was Stern. Of course, in Poland, it was appropriate to have a Polish-sounding name. So even though my Hebrew name was Miriam, I was called Manya. And
where were you born?
I was born in Zaleszczyki, which is a town that was on the Dniester. It was a border between Romania and Poland. And it was, even though it was a small town, but it was a very well-known town. It was like Miami of Poland. It was a resort place. And during the summer, we had a lot of hotels, and people used to come from the whole country. It was also the only place, the area in Poland, where grapes were growing and apricots, which were not able to grow in other parts because of the climate. I had 2 sisters and a brother, and of course my parents and my 2 sisters were married before the war, and one of them had a child, and they all perished during the war.
Let me ask you about your mother and your father. What was your family life like? What was a typical day?
Well, my father was a businessman, and my mother, of course, was a housewife. And, you know, a European housewife had much more to do than the housewives here today. It was shopping every day and cooking and taking care of the family. There were no refrigerators and washing machines and things like that, even though we were all, you know, a very nice middle-class family.
What year were you born, did you say?
Yes, in 1929.
Okay.
And I was the youngest of 4 children. And until the war, it was just, I went to public school.
What kind of school was it?
In Poland, we had schools just like here. I went to, actually, it was a girls' school. The boys and girls did not go together. And that was strictly where they taught us all the subjects. But in the afternoon, I used to attend a Hebrew school, where they taught mainly reading and writing.
Mm-hmm.
And life was just wonderful to a certain extent until 1939.
Do you remember holidays at home before?
Oh, yes.
Can you tell me about some?
That was always a very happy time, because the family was together. I mean, there was not that anybody was out of home like here, away to school, but it was always the traditional foods and the services, and we lived in the Jewish area, where we were surrounded by synagogues.
Did all the Jewish people live in that same area in your city?
Yeah, it was a small town, so wherever they lived, it was a walking distance. But the area where we lived was close to most of the major synagogues, because there were so many and there were small ones, but we had the big synagogue and the other one, which was called the Bais Medrash. And I always recall that on Simchat Torah, they used to bring in a Torah to our house. And all the young people used to come in, and they used to read from the Torah in our house.
And why is this?
It was a custom. I don't know why, but they used to do that.
Was your father in some way
no, well, we were all very well, we were all Sabbath observers, very religious. I mean, my father was not a rabbi, but very well, educated. And we used to, afterwards, I remember that my mother used to make all kinds of goodies and serve, like potato latkes and cake and honey cake and sponge cake. It was like a break in between the services. That was a very happy occasion. Of course, Passover, that was something we all looked forward to, the big cleaning and bringing down the dishes. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, my husband and I went on a trip to Europe, and we were in Copenhagen, and I saw a little dish. It was a little pitcher that reminded me of the pitcher that I used to call mine, which was a Passover dish. And when he saw me, how excited I got when I saw it, he insisted and he bought it. So I have it. It's not exactly the same, but it sort of reminded me of the one that I used to have as a child.
How did they bake matzah in your town?
Oh, sure. They had a place not too far from us. As a matter of fact, even on the year, I remember when the Germans were in already, they baked matzah. There was a special bakery where they used to do the baking. It was not, no one went in and bought 5 pounds of packaged matzahs. This was all done by hand, like they still do here, the old-fashioned way. We, as a matter of fact, we have some of that home-baked matzah in our house every year. Because my husband comes from a very Orthodox family. His father was a rabbi, and so all his brothers. He himself attended a yeshiva in Europe, one of the most famous ones, which was called the Miriam yeshiva. So we still use that kind of matzah for Passover. It's a little bit thick and not as tasty like the bought one, but it's tradition.
Did you have a special job helping your mother get ready for Pesach?
Oh, sure. Putting away, bringing all the yearly dishes up to the attic and bringing down the Passover dishes. The house used to be clean, spotless from top to bottom. It was a big, very exciting time, big event. That was Passover and the high holidays, of course. Now I sort of dread the high holidays when they come because they bring back bad memories. You sort of forgot about the good times, but a lot of bad things happen during the high holidays because the war started in September. So first in 1939, the part where I lived, half of Poland was occupied by the Russians. And we were under the Russian occupation till 1941. During that time, I was going to school.
How did your school change during this occupation? What happened in your town that...
When the Russians came in, we went on to school like before, except that the main subject that we were taught in Russian instead of Polish.
Did that pose a problem?
Well, not too much, because that part of Poland, there were a lot of Ukrainian people were living there. And Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian are very similar. So it did not, especially, when you are young, you pick up a language very easily. You also forget very fast. if you don't use it. But I was amazed to discover recently that I still remember quite a bit. We have at our temple a group of women that tape books for the blind. Mm-hmm. And I do that with a friend of mine. And I was asked by the woman that's in charge if I could monitor somebody that will be reading in Russian. And she gave me the book to read, and I was able to understand quite a bit. I mean, not every word, but so I still remember that. So
how old were you when the Russians came in?
The Russians came in 41, so I was 12 at the time.
What was that day like?
Pardon?
What was that day like? What did you see?
When they walked in, mm-hmm. I remember when the war broke out. It was on a Friday, and it was just very, very sad time, and because we didn't know what to expect. Yet, when they finally came into town, they were very peaceful.
They meaning who?
The Russians. Mm-hmm. Yes, and we figured that at least we won't be suffering from the bombs, because the town where I lived was bombed, and we had 2 bridges that were connecting Poland with Romania, and both of them were destroyed by bombs, and we were, in those days we were afraid that, they'll throw a bomb on where we lived. So when the shelling and the bombing stopped, we were almost happy to see that the war was over.
That's what
to a certain extent, we thought it was over. Well, of course, they came in and settled, and there was a lot. I remember one day they came in and they took my father from the house, and we thought that we'll never see him again. As a matter of fact, this is one of the things that I just read about the other day. And they kept him there at the police because they thought that he was anybody that they felt was a businessman that maybe exploited others. They were no good.
What was his business?
He was in the grain business. So they kept him at the police station for about 8 hours, and they finally released him and told him to go home. Then one day they just came in, it was on a Saturday, and they just searched the house. They didn't say why or what they were searching for, but they searched. And we didn't know, couldn't say anything, and that was it. But the rest of the time it was just living almost the way it is in Russia now. Things apparently have not changed, because we were in Leningrad a few years ago, and they still have the lines of people standing to go into stores to buy things, and that's what we used to do, stand in line waiting for bread or waiting for milk, and it was just existing. This was for 2 years.
As a youngster living through this, what were your thoughts? What did you imagine was happening?
I don't think I really thought that much about it, what was happening. See, we were also before the war, we as Jews we always felt differently.
In what way?
Well, for instance, in our town, there were stores which had signs, entrance for Jews and dogs forbidden.
What year were those signs put up?
Those were before the war, before 1939. So we never felt free. But we didn't know anything else. This was our way of living. We were a minority, and we were the Jews. We were always pointed at. And
How about before the war in school? Were you treated any differently?
No, I didn't feel it. I had Polish girlfriends, and we got along very well. That was no problem. I never felt it. But we, like our parents never socialized or never. It was always just cordial, and that's it. There was never a real closeness or friendship with the Polish people. The Jews were always separate.
But your generation did socialize with the Polish people?
In school, yes. Yes.
How about outside of school? On a Sunday, or did you have school on Sunday? No, you
No.
probably didn't.
No, we didn't have school on Sunday. We used to have school on Saturday.
How did that work for you, if you came from a religious family?
I used to go to school, but I did not write on Saturday. See, we had to go to school, but we were not allowed to write. So that was, we were excused as far as that was concerned. They allowed us this. And otherwise, we just didn't know any better. So this was our life. And during the Russian occupation, there was no choice. We just accepted things because we thought it could be worse, because some people were taken away and sent to Siberia from our area.
How was this done? How were they taken away?
Very, very simply. They used to come in the middle of the night and just say, pack a suitcase, pack whatever you can, or just whatever you were wearing, and let's go.
Who was this that came in?
This was the Russian NKVD, they called them. That was the secret police. I remember my cousin stayed with a friend of hers who was a daughter of a very rich people. They went to school together, and they came in during the night, and they took this young girl. She was about 18 or 19. They took her, and my cousin cried when they took her away, and the secret police said to her, save the tears for yourself. Well, anyway, my cousin perished during the Holocaust. This girl was sent to Siberia. They had both started medical school, and apparently she worked there as a nurse, and she survived, and I heard after the war that she went to Israel. So at least she survived.
Did anyone in your family get sent to Siberia?
Not the immediate family, no. But there were some people from our town that were sent, and there were some that were just because they were more comfortable, or somebody maybe said, there were some people that were communists, local people. And if they knew somebody in the secret police and they could tell them, oh, this man, he was mean, or he was very rich, and things like that, then, but if they really didn't harm anyone, then instead of sending them to Siberia, they made them leave all their possessions and move to another city. That was that was one of my best friends, but whom I also write here, that I'll never forget her, because we were really like two sisters. And they had to move to another city.
Because they were?
Because they were well off. For that only reason. Her father owned a mill where they were making flour out of grain. And they survived, she and her father and a sister survived the war by hiding in the cellar of a Gentile family. And
what city was this?
that was Buchach. And she, after when the Russians came in 1944, they came out of that hiding place. But unfortunately, what happened at that time, the Russians advanced as far as another city, which was called Tarnopol. And there they had a brewery. And of course, the Russians are known for liking to drink. And they all got drunk, the army. And the Germans were able to push them back. So when the Russians withdrew and went back into that city, some of the people informed the Germans that this Jewish man and his children was hiding in this family's house. They went there, they took him out, and they shot them. And a few days later, the Russians came back, but it was already too late. So that was another terrible shock for me after the war.
Before the war began, do you remember as a young child what you used to do for fun? What did you like to do?
Well, during the summer, we used to go to the beach, you know, during vacation time, because it was a resort place, and that was mainly what we were doing. We had parks, and we, we used to go for walks. We used to have a little forest. We used to go to pick flowers. We used to do just silly little things and be happy. You know, we used to get together and play games.
Did you belong to any clubs?
We didn't have anything like that, no. We just had, you know, close friends, play ball, or make, sew dresses for dolls and things like that. I remember we used to do that, play with beads, and one of my friends, she used to put on like a show, and here they use what they call them, puppets. She used to present with different beads with different like puppets, and gosh, you made me recall now things that I haven't thought of
What did you
in
just
ages.
think of?
No, this part,
yeah.
you know, Yola, Malcha, Yenya, we used to do that, yeah.
You mentioned you had some sisters that were married.
Yes.
Did they live in the same town with you?
Yes, yes. Yes, we were all together till that day. That was Yom Kippur, 1942. In 1941, the Germans came in.
What was that day like?
Terrible. Black. There were rumors. I don't exactly recall what was said, but everybody expected that things were going to be very bad. And
what were some of the rumors?
Well, the rumors were that the Germans hated Jews. And it was already, while the Russians were still in our part, there were a lot of Jews that came into our city from the other part of Poland, which was occupied by the Germans, and also people from Hungary, whom the Germans let leave because they were Polish citizens.
What were these people saying about the Germans?
Well, they were the ones that brought the news, but no one believed them.
What were they saying?
They were saying they were grabbing people off the streets, and no one ever heard from them again. They didn't know what they were doing with them. But we thought, well, there must have been people that maybe were involved in politics or some other important things. But average people they wouldn't harm any average people that don't hurt anybody. I mean, for what reason would they hurt an individual that is just a peaceful citizen? No one believed that. No one. Especially, everybody was saying the German people, they are such high-class people, well-educated, and they would never do anything immoral.
Who was saying things like that?
I used to hear my parents talk like this with the other relatives and friends. This is what people were saying. They would never do a thing like that.
Grabbing people.
Right.
Did they say anything else that they were doing?
They didn't. Oh, the other people? Well, just that they lost all their possessions and they just came with the things that they could bring with them. And they were saying about, how the Germans were talking down and, about incidents of cutting beards of people, of the payers, and beating people. It was something that we couldn't believe. And they said that they saw it themselves, but we didn't believe until we saw it in our city. And that was the first day they arrived. There was a very pious old man. And that's exactly what they did. They grabbed him by the beard and cut off his beard. And then, I don't remember this, but I read it, what I wrote, that they shot 2 people. They took them out, to the outside of the city limits, and shot them.
What day was this? Do you remember?
No.
In 19...
That was in 1941, shortly after they came in. And I also recall that there was one SS man that came in the center of the city. It was like a square, and he yelled out, within 5 minutes, I don't want to see any Jews here. And a few days later, we were all told to wear white armbands with the blue star on it, and so that we can be identified. And anybody that wouldn't wear it would be shot immediately. And also, we were not allowed to walk on the main streets of the town. That was the beginning of the end. And from that time on, it was just from day to day, not knowing what the next day will bring.
What was the talk in your house, your mother and father, when the Germans came in? What were they worried about? What were they talking?
They were mainly worried about us, and I remember them saying that they lived through the First World War, and they were hoping that they suffered already for us, for our sake, but now they see that it wasn't so, and they just anticipated that things were not going to be good. Yet there was not much that we could do. Another thing which is very sad, in our city, we had an opportunity to run away to Romania, and from there maybe illegally to Israel or any place else. But again, there were some other people in the city which said the Germans, such civilized people, it's not true, they are not going to do anything to us. And we didn't run away.
Tell me,
we stayed home.
How was this possible, this way to escape? How was it organized?
It didn't have to be organized. We had bridges that led to Romania. And during that time, the Polish army was running away, and there was chaos. Everything, all the borders were open. You didn't need any identification or passports or anything like that. So, but very few people did, because no one wanted to leave home or families, and they said, well, we're going to go, what's going to happen? This too shall pass and everything will be all right. I guess our parents in that generation felt they were occupied by different countries. The part of Poland where I live was at one time Austria. At one time it was Russia. After the First World War it was Poland. So actually it's been going through different occupations so many times that no one knew what to expect, how long the Poles will be, or the Russians, or the Germans, or who will be next. So everyone just felt that it was safest to stay home.
So you put on the white armbands with the
Oh,
stars.
yes. Oh, yes. And that's what we wore all the time.
And what were your days like then?
Well, the days were rough. There was a shortage in food. But I also describe it here, fortunately, we had a very good friend, a farmer, who lived, you know, outside of the city, you know, in a village not too far from us. And he used to supply us. He used to come at night and bring us flour or some vegetables, potatoes, and things like that.
Was he risking anything by bringing that?
Yes, he was. He was, but he was very good. He was very good to us. Of course, you know, there was a lot of hunger during those days. Even we ate, you know, we got some potatoes. We used to one day eat the potatoes and the next day wash the potato peels and cook them. There was a lot of hunger during those years.
As a young girl, though, how did you pass each day?
Well, the Germans didn't care how young you were, and they had work they made everybody work. And during the summer, I remember with my friends, they sent us all to, there was like a Jewish community. It was like a militia, and they were in charge. The Germans put them in charge to be in charge of the Jews. That's the psychology they used.
Did this
So this Jewish,
have a name, this group?
Judenrat. And they had to supply, the Germans would give them an order, today we need so many girls for this work, or so many men for this job. So I remember during the summer we used to work in the field or pick apples, fruits, and that's what I wrote here, that one day I ate so much that it made me sick.
You keep referring to a diary that you kept.
Yes.
Yes. Could you tell me how it was that you decided to start it?
Well, this is what I wrote after. This was in 1944 when we were liberated by the Russians. I was very miserable because I felt that now I had an opportunity to live, but I didn't want to live. I had nothing to live for. So, and I had nobody to talk to. So I decided to write.
So actually you wrote it after?
It was written after, yes. And this is what I wrote, that these are my recollections. And unfortunately, I didn't write too much because each time I wrote, I used to get very emotionally upset. And So after I stopped writing it, I put it away and I didn't read it till just the other day because I felt that it will bring back some memories that I can talk about today. As a matter of fact, one of the things here, which I never forgot, but a year after the Germans came in, for 1 year we lived in our own home. And after that, they decided to make our city Judenrein. So everybody had to move to another nearby town, which was the ghetto. But they concentrated all the Jews from the whole vicinity there.
Where was this?
Kluster was the name of that town. And we left our hometown on Yom Kippur, and when we passed by the town church, which had a clock on it, the clock struck 12. And every year at 12 o'clock on Yom Kippur, it'll be all right. Brings back memories.
You packed up all your belongings?
Well, again, this man who was so nice to us, he came with his wagon, horse and wagon, and he took us to the ghetto. So we were able to take, some things with us.
He volunteered to come and take you?
Well, we asked him, and he came. And
what did you take with you?
I suppose just some clothing and some bedding, and I guess some pots and pans. I really don't remember. I know that I had my own album with pictures. I felt this was mine, And I had it almost till the end, until the second time when the Germans left and came back again. That time when we ran again, that's when I left it. Never recovered it.
Did you go with your sisters? And
that's another thing. When we moved to the ghetto at that time, my parents and my older sister with her husband and child, my younger sister's husband died of pneumonia during the Russian occupation. So before we were sent out to the ghetto, the Germans decided to keep some Jews in our city, those that they felt they could use for work. So my younger sister and brother remained, and the rest of us left for the ghetto. And at that time we thought that since they remained and the Germans can use them, that they are much safer than we would be in the ghetto. And my father felt that it was good for us to spread in different places. He said, maybe somebody will survive. I somehow never really thought that something like this could happen. And then when we came to the ghetto,
like something like what could happen? You never thought?
That we could really all be killed. I just couldn't think of it. although I had a previous experience, which was in the first year when the Germans came in. One day they asked that at least one person from every family should come to work at a certain area. I don't know till this day why. I went with my cousin because they said somebody has to go and we'll have to register. But my cousin said, we are not going to go there really. We are going to go over to the hospital. She knew it was near the hospital. She knew some of the sisters there. It was a Catholic hospital, and we'll stay there. The gathering place was supposed to be it was a bombed barracks where soldiers used to be stationed, the Polish army. But that area was bombed, so some buildings were like halfway demolished. And as we started going there were hundreds of people going. My cousin says, well, so many people. She was much older. She said, if so many people are going, we'll go too. Whatever happens to everybody will happen to us. And we went. And there was a big square, and they made us all line up and run around that square. And the SS men, they were standing and just hitting us like horses, whipping. And then we went inside, and they took everybody's name and age and occupation. So everyone thought that they were going to arrange it in such a way that, men or certain professions, they'll send to different types of jobs. But as the time went on, they were taking out 10 people at the time. And there was some deep holes like in that area from the bombs that fell that, I don't really know whether the Russians bombed there. Must have been the Russians because they were the ones that occupied this area. And each time they took out 10 people, we heard 10 shots. And the line was moving closer and closer. And I was standing with my cousin, and I said, I'm scared. Let's run away. And she said, you can't. They took our names. Anyway, I kept on going, like between the people towards the end of the line. And there were a lot of SS men at that time, and they were just watching and walking around inside and outside. That building had the windows were shattered. And it was on the ground floor, and I was standing near the window, and it was like somebody pushed me. And I jumped out of the window, and I ran. And they started shooting after me. So I fell down, and they must have thought that I was dead. So I started crawling, and I crawled over, it was not what you would call here a highway, but it was like a main street. And I crawled over to the other side, but they couldn't see me anymore. And I went into a Polish family that lived there. And I told them that I ran away and what I thought was happening there. And they looked at me. I was like in shock. And then I remember that I wrote a note, and I asked this man, when it got dark, he went into town, and he brought my note to my parents. I wanted them to tell me what I should do, if it was safe for me to come home, my father came back with this man to get me, and I went home. In town, they didn't know what transpired.
How far from town was this?
Maybe a mile. And when I came home and I told them what I heard, what was happening, they all thought, well, here's a kid, she's all confused, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And of course, they never saw these people anymore, but everybody thought, since there were so many young people, that perhaps rumors started going around that they must have taken them to Russia or near the front for the German soldiers or to work in other areas. But nothing was ever heard from most of these people, except some men were taken to an Arbeitslager, which was nearby.
Tell me, how did you respond to these people that didn't believe you?
Well, the next day, the rabbi, who was a friend of the family, called for me, and he questioned me, and he was the only one. He believed me. No one believed me, what I heard. That I heard 10 shots each time they took out 10 people. Well, this was still questionable. Some people were still living with the hopes that maybe some of these people were alive, until after the war they opened up these graves, and sure enough, all these people were there. At that day, 2 other people jumped out of the window and ran away. I don't believe they are alive anymore. But this was something that I myself can't believe why or how I did it, except that it was, you've got to believe that it was meant to be that way. I had a lot of conflicts within myself and had a lot of reconciling to do. And
what was the conflict about?
Why I survived and not the rest of my family. I certainly don't feel that I was any better than they. And it was so hard because no one remained. And some of my friends had a sister or a brother or one parent. Okay, I'll be all right. I had nobody. So I didn't want to live, but I couldn't die. As a matter of fact, I felt worse after the war, because during the war, after they were gone, I felt, well, yesterday it was them, tomorrow it will be I. I knew that, there was no other way.
You went with your family into the ghetto, your mother, your father.
Yeah, right.
One sister.
Yeah,
and
my sister and brother remained in Zalesteki, and the rest of us went to the ghetto. While I was in the ghetto, there was a friend of the family who was in that Judenrat in Tluste, and he came over one day, spoke to my mother, and he said, I think it may be safer if I go to work in the village. There was a village nearby, because there was no concentration of so many Jews, because that's what it was leading up to, concentrating all the Jews in one area. But before that, Yeah, that's what it was. So, so my father said that I should go. I didn't want to go. I wanted to be with everybody. And he said, no. He said, go. Maybe someone from the family will spread out. Maybe someone will remain. So I went, and while I was there, I was supposed to work. There was, it was a big farm that once belonged to one individual, and there was like a big house, and a German family moved in there, an SS man, and he was in charge of this farm. And of course, there were barracks where eventually became an Arbeitslager, where all the Jews were there and working in the fields. This is how I got to this Arbeitslager. But I, instead of living in the barracks and working most of the time in the fields, I was working. There was a Polish woman that ran the household, and I was working in the kitchen and doing all kinds of chores there.
So it was your father's idea that you should go there?
That I should go.
Your mother, did she agree?
She also agreed on that, yes. My sister and brother had remained in Zaleszczyki. Well, before, within a few months, they had gathered some people in the ghetto, and my father was one of them. They grabbed him from the street, and no one ever heard of him, ever saw him.
This is before you went away?
That was, no, I was already in Lisovce. That was the name of the town where the ghetto, where the Arbeitslager was.
How long were you in the ghetto with your family, though?
Just, I think, not more than about 4 or 6 weeks in the ghetto.
In this ghetto, where were the people from?
The people from the whole vicinity of that town. Every town around that area became Judenrein.
And when the people got together in this ghetto, what did they think would happen to them?
They were just sitting and waiting.
For what?
For the end. They knew nothing good was going to happen there.
Had they heard of anything other than ghettos?
No. They knew they were making ghettos all over the area. Wherever the Germans came in, they were concentrating the people in ghettos. And I suppose everyone knew what the purpose was. As a matter of fact, one evening before I went to this camp, they went from house to house, and they were just, whoever was in the house, they took the people out and took them away. The place where we stayed, these were relatives of my brother-in-laws. They had built a bunker, which was like a hiding place. And it wasn't a very safe hiding place as long as no one searched too closely. They just kicked the front door, and they didn't see anybody, so they went away. That's how we remained that time.
You were hiding in a bunker?
Hiding, yes.
How was the bunker built?
It was an attic, and they built a partition so that when you came into that attic, you thought this was it. You didn't see that this was a wall, and behind that wall there was another little area where we were all sitting.
How many of you were there?
Oh, there must have been at least 10 people there. There were 3 families in 2 rooms.
Did you spend your days in that room, or just when you thought the Germans were coming?
Just when we thought that they were coming to gather us. And
how could you imagine? Did you hear rumors they were coming on this day and such and such?
Yeah. There was usually somebody, or we started hearing shooting, or we saw them run around. Word used to spread somehow that something is happening. You know, so we would run, and sometimes there were false alarms, but most of the time they were real. And none of the bunkers were that secure that eventually, when they really wanted to find people, they did find them. So on one of those occasions, my father was caught, and that was it. And then the next news I remember hearing was that
How did you get that news?
Yeah, that's another thing. Two of my cousins were also in that Arbeitslager where I was. They came a few days later. They survived this, and they came. And I'm describing this in my little diary here, that when I saw them, I saw on their faces already that something happened. And they were the ones to inform me about my father. And then a few weeks later, I got the news that my sister and brother, who had remained in our hometown, that everyone from there who had remained to work there, you know, about 50 people, 100 people, I don't recall, that they were all put on a train and taken away.
And how did you get this news?
Well, this I heard from my mother and my sister, that somebody came from our hometown and told them this.
You saw your mother again? You went back home to the ghetto?
I went back to the ghetto, yes. I went back to the ghetto. It was like 5 miles. It was a walking distance, you know, 5 miles walk. And I remember that the last time I saw her, she said she didn't want to live anymore after she lost the children and my father. And I remember crying and telling her that she had me and that she had to live for me. Well,
what did she say?
Her life wasn't worth anything anymore. Then I think that this was 1942, and 43 they liquidated the ghetto.
You were still at the
I was in that
camp?
Arbeitslager, yes.
Still in the
between,
house?
I was sent, no, this Polish woman and this German SS man with his family were transferred to another Arbeitslager nearby, and they took me along with them. And I was there for a while, then I returned to the original one. But in June of that year, they made the ghetto, they liquidated the ghetto. So some of the people, they gathered all the Jews, and some of the younger people they sent to the camps nearby, and the rest of them they shot in that area. There was a mass grave, and that was my mother, my sister, and my little nephew. My brother-in-law escaped, and he went to the Arbeitslager, to another one. I forgot the name of it. But then they even liquidated that one too, the Arbeitslager. As a matter of fact, that's what they started doing. When the war started going bad for the Germans with the Russians, they started liquidating one camp after another. And ours was, they were coming, we were on the list, except things started happening so fast that they had no time to liquidate it. That's the only reason why most of the people from our camp survived.
How many people were in your camp?
Must have been a couple hundred.
And before these liquidations began, what was your job? What did you have to do?
Well, most of the people, we either worked in the fields, you know, like gathering potatoes, and they also had cows and horses. And I worked in that house there, so I did mostly housework. So I was, you know, considering as far as the work, or I had more food than anybody else because, you know, this Polish woman was very nice to me. And, you know, when you work in a kitchen, there was always something to eat.
Did you have anybody in that camp from time to time that you knew?
Well, there was one family. There was one family with their children, and they were very, very nice to me. They sort of like adopted me, and I was just like part of them. There was one family, then they were killed, and because what happened one day, the local people, when the Germans started moving back, there were a lot of local people that were very helpful to the Germans and against the Jews. And they shot a lot of Jewish people. I never saw my father cry. That was the only time I saw him cry.
Okay, real sad.
You never saw your father cry?
No. The only time I saw him cry was when we left home, and the last time when we were all together and when we left our house. And he says, only God knows if we'll ever be together again. I guess he knew.
It's interesting, though, his philosophy of having everybody spread out so someone will survive.
Yes, yes. And that philosophy, and like I told my husband after reading this, that I see where I got my strength, you know, to go on and to make the best of life, because I felt that I remained here for a reason. Must have been. There was a time that I became an atheist. Oh, I was, how could there be a God? How could anyone create something like this? But as time went on, and I always used to say to myself, what would my parents do? What would they tell me to do? What would they advise me to do? And this sort of kept me going.
When you were in the war camp, or after the war?
After the war. That was a very, very bad time, because having already a chance to live and not wanting to live, it was very hard. It was very hard. It's, I realize now there are psychologists, psychiatrists to help you with problems. I stayed on after the war with a family who were also...
In Poland?
Yes. They were in this Arbeitslager all the time, and I sort of attached myself to them. They had a daughter, she was older, and I became like part of their family. And we were liberated by the Russians. And then we lived in 1944. And
what was that day like when the Russians came?
That is an unbelievable story. About 2 weeks before, or maybe even more, we were still in this Arbeitslager. And one day, the German who was in charge of the camp called me out, told me to go outside. He took the revolver and he said to me, for several days, the German army was marching through that village, going back from the Russian front. So he told me to go out, and he said that he saw me laughing, that I was happy to see the way the German army looked. Sounds crazy. And he said, turn around and walk. And he took the revolver, and I walked. And I guess he just didn't have the heart. And he shot in the air a few times, and I just walked. He didn't kill me.
Did you think he was going to?
Oh, yes. There was no question in my mind that that's what he was going to do.
Tell me, what was the treatment of the German SS to the people in the work camp?
Not bad. I mean, as long as they were working and they were producing, then, and they were needed, then, you know, they were getting the minimum food. But somehow some of the villagers were nice, and they would give some of the people some food, and whatever they didn't give them, people would steal.
But how about discipline or brutality or anything?
It was more done by the local people than the Germans, because there was only one German that was in charge. But
one guard for hundreds.
Right, one German. But the local Ukrainian police, they were responsible for the care in this.
What was their
Jews.
job?
To beat the Jews.
Were they stationed in the camp?
They were stationed in the camp, outside of the camp. They made sure that the Jews did their work. And they knew they had no place to run or anything.
Did anybody try to run?
There was no place to run. There were some that hid in the forest, but it was not easy because, you know, winter time and food and these things were very hard in that area. But as the Germans were approaching, we realized, as the Germans were leaving, we realized that we were going to be even worse off, left in the hands of the local militia. And it was to whoever didn't run away from the camp and hid someplace, they were the ones that shot a lot of people.
What did you do?
Well, we knew some Polish family in the village, and they risked their life. I was, how they store things in the haystack. They took out some hay from the center, and there I was sitting for several days. At night they used to bring me over something to eat. And I remember once he came over and he said that they had in the next little house, a married son and daughter-in-law lived, and the daughter-in-law had 2 small children, and she said she was afraid, if the Germans discover me, that they would shoot them. And again, it was meant to be. The Germans came with the bayonets, they were going like this, and they left.
You were inside when the bayonets were?
When they were testing to see if there was anybody there. And then at night, sometimes, this was just a question of a few days until the Russians came in. But what happened was, one day, about a month before, I woke up in the morning and I said I had a very strange dream. I dreamt that the Russians were coming in to liberate us on the 26th of March. And I said to my friends around there, I said, did you ever hear of such a thing? Not just the month, but the day. That was the day that the Russians marched into the village where the labor camp was. So everybody who was hiding, whether in the woods or with some families, came out.
How did you hear if you were in the haystack?
These Polish people, they saw them. They say the Russians are here in the village. So we came out, and that was a day of great joy to see the Russians.
What
Again,
did you personally do?
I think we kissed their feet. And they told us that the town where the ghetto was, that it was free, there were no Germans anymore, and that we could go there. So most of the survivors came into that town. And we were there for only a short time, which I told you about previously, when the Russians advanced, and then they had to retreat because they drank too much. And at that time, also a lot of people lost their lives because it was March, and there was a big snowstorm. And the Germans knew that, they could hear apparently the tanks, and most of the people that remained alive went with the Russians, followed them. We followed the Russian tanks back. They came about 5 o'clock in the morning. They knocked at the doors where they knew there were some Jewish people. And they said, get ready, the Germans are coming back here. And a lot of people lost their lives because of the cold. They froze.
That's what you did? You followed the tanks?
We followed the tanks, and they had...
Who were you with at that time?
Some of the people that remained in the camp. It was all like one big family, especially that one particular family that I was with. And also, the lucky thing was the Germans were bombing, but since it was such a thick snow, they couldn't see where they were throwing the bombs. So That's why we survived. And they retreated to another, as far as another town, and then they pushed back again, the Germans, and kept pushing them all the way. This was 1944. So in other words, I was liberated by the Russians in 1944 and remained in that city with some of the other survivors from the whole area, because most of the people tried to stick together, the survivors.
And what city was that?
That was Borstov. That's where I wrote this.
That's where you began to write.
Yes. That's when I felt that I had a chance to live, yet life wasn't worth living.
Is that what you said in there?
That's what I said. But I guess the will to live was stronger. And also, I felt that once I had a chance to live, I had to fight it within myself to live as normal a life as possible, and to try to put my past in the back of my mind, or at least not to live outwardly with the past. That's why I never talked to anybody. I knew somebody that once said to me she feels best when she can talk about her past and people listen to her. I didn't want to. I couldn't talk. Till this day, I can't watch any movies, anything on television. It's very upsetting to me after all these years. I guess it's something that you just never get over. I know you never get over. It's always with me and always will be. But I have a lot to be grateful for too. And I'm glad that I made the decision that I did, because life has been wonderful to me in spite of my past. I have a wonderful husband, a wonderful son, and I felt that that was a good reason for me to have been saved and to continue living. So
you stayed with this family after the war?
Oh, after the war. Well, that's another big long story. After the war, we stayed with his family in Borstov until the war was over in 1945.
So that was almost almost a year.
Right, right. And I worked in an office. I don't even remember what I did. I was doing some adding on a basket. Is that what you call it?
Oh, abacus.
Abacus.
Right.
I don't really know how much I could have done, but I know that I worked in an office, whatever I did there. And then finally came...
Where were these people originally from?
Also Poland, from the same area.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, they were from the town where the ghetto was. Mm-hmm. And when the war was over, shortly after the war was over, something unexpected happened. The Russians, who are so well known that they don't let anybody out of Russia, gave all the Polish people permission to leave. Whoever wanted to leave that part which was Poland until 1939 could leave. And so it was organized, and most of the people left by train for the other part of Poland, which was Poland, the Poland that it is now. And there, through I'm not going to go into any details, but through the
You
work.
can. We're interested. Sure.
Through the work of the hires, we were able to register and go to Czechoslovakia.
And that's what you did.
That's what a lot of Jewish people did. See, the aim was, after leaving Russia, like I said in this diary, it was wonderful to have been liberated by the Russians from the Germans, but it was much more important that they let us out to give us an opportunity to really be able to live. And so it was a long wait in Czechoslovakia until we illegally crossed the border to, we were all along under the supervision of the American Joint Distribution Committee.
Where in Czechoslovakia did you
In Prague. Prague. And from there,
did anyone come from your hometown while you were waiting?
That was still the time when everybody was searching and hoping that maybe somebody someplace survived. Nobody from my hometown, very, very few people survived. There were some cities in Europe where more people survived. My city, very, very few people. We waited in Czechoslovakia until we were able to cross the border illegally at night. And then we were on the other side of the border, were awaiting us American trucks, and they took us to München. And there we were taken to the Funkaserne, which was also like barracks for army barracks. And
you
from
went
there,
with this family.
With this family and some other people that attached themselves. We were all one big family. And we all went to DP camps. And there, from there...
Which city did you go to?
Gabelsee. That was not too far from Munich. That used to be, I think, a hospital or place for crazy people. I think that's what it was. Anyway, there was one big kitchen. You had to stand on line, and you know, there were several people in one room, but that was freedom. That was life, because we were not afraid of being killed.
You were 16.
Yes. And there we were registered by the Joint Committee to go either to Israel or to the United States, whoever had relatives in the United States or in Israel or wherever. And I knew that I had only one cousin left from the whole family. My mother had 3 brothers, and my father had a brother, and there were their children and cousins and aunts and uncles. And no one was left except this one cousin that went before the war to Israel. So I registered. I knew that she was in Israel, but I didn't know her address or anything like that. But she had a friend who was in the working for the Joint Committee, and her friend was in Europe, and she asked her to search for anyone. And she found me in that camp, so she was the first one to notify my cousin that I was the only one that was alive. So I registered to go either to Israel or to the United States, wherever I will be able to get out sooner. because I knew my cousin was in a kibbutz, and as much as I wanted to be with her, I knew the conditions there, for what she described to me, were not that good at that time. This was 1945. That was before Israel was a state.
Tell me something. You're 16 years old.
Yeah.
What were you imagining life was going to be like for you?
I really can't say. I definitely did not imagine that it was going to be as wonderful as it was, as it is. All I was hoping for is to have, I'll tell you, when I got to the United States, what my big ambition was. I thought to be a waitress would have been the best thing, to be able to work as a waitress. Well, anyway, I registered, and being that I was an orphan and underage, they...
Were you among the youngest to survive?
No, there were... I had two close friends that were my age. Two sisters. One was 2 years older. Her sister is my age. And they survived by having documents made that they were Poles. And they were working, they had different names in all the...
In what country?
Pardon?
In what country? In Poland? Were they working?
They were working, yes, in another part of Poland. And then there were some that were even in the concentration, in the ones that were like in I have friends here now that have the numbers. They were from those camps, you know, like Auschwitz or Treblinka and all these places. They were my age. They took them at any age, even to those camps. I also had a cousin by marriage who was on her way to Auschwitz with her 2 children, and she threw out the children through the window, and then she jumped and went into the field and gathered them. Those 2 boys are now in New York. Those are my second cousins. She passed away a couple of years ago. But so when it came through that I was going to be able to go to the United States first, I thought I would go. Some of my friends had relatives here. I didn't have any relatives in the United States. But the family that I was with in camp, they had a daughter in Kansas City, Missouri. So when I was getting ready to leave for the United States, they wrote to their daughter that I was coming. Their daughter, with her husband and 2 children, escaped Hitler from Vienna in 1938. So when they wrote to them, they said that when I come to the United States, they would like me to come and live with them. So when I arrived in New York with my friends, and some of them went to live with their relatives, and most of us, like, you know, I was in New York for about a week.
How did you arrive?
I came on Marine Marlin. That was a military ship that was converted into a passenger ship.
And how many years or months did you spend in the DP camp waiting?
I relatively didn't wait too long, because I came in December 46. The war was over in 45, and this was December 46. So it wasn't that bad.
And that whole year, what did you do during that year?
From
45 to 46, December.
From 45. Well, we didn't Well, we were in Poland part of the time, and part of the time in Czechoslovakia, and part of the time in Germany.
Okay.
That's where the year went. And
so you arrived. What did you see that day on the boat?
Well, I have here a description of
Would
my...
you read it?
It's all in Polish.
If you see it, could you translate it? For instance, read
These
what you wrote.
some of the papers that I wrote when I got on the boat. I mean, my impression of walking into a dining room with white tablecloth and white bread and butter, which we haven't seen all these years, and an orange near every place setting. Would you want me to read it in Polish?
Certainly.
Who will understand? This is written until I got seasick. This is where I am. This is where I stopped.
Read it and then translate.
O. Godzina 21. The hour is 21. Jestem równo 26 godzin na morzu. I am now 26 hours on the ocean. Chcę kolejnie opisać dotychczasowe wrażenia. I want to describe my impressions up till now. Pociągiem zajechaliśmy wprost na brzeg morza. With the train we went to the edge of the ocean. Tu wysiedliliśmy i z bagażem w rękach podeszliśmy do okrętu. Here we got out and with our luggage in our hands we went to the boat, gdzie po okazaniu karty okrętowej wskazano nam, w którym kierunku mamy udać się do naszych kabin. After we showed our cards, they showed us where to go to our cabins. Jadę pierwszą klasą. I am in the first class. To jest na samej górze. This is on the upper deck. Na korytarzach kręciła się obsługa. In the halls there were all people that work on the boat. White and black. This was something, you know, we never saw any black people. And they showed us to our cabins. Mieszkam w pokoju A67. This is the number of my cabin. Pokój jest dość duży, 6 piętrowych łóżek. The room is quite large, 6 two-story beds, lecz tylko parterowy i pierwszy piętrowy są obsadzone. Only the two-story in Europe, the ground floor doesn't count. So it's the ground bed and the second bed is occupied. The third is empty. Na drugich piętrach trzymamy bagaż. Our luggage is on the top bed. Ja mieszkam na pierwszym piętrze, z czego jestem bardzo zadowolona. I am on the top bed and I'm very satisfied, bo w razie choroby wolę być na górze. In case I'm sick, I prefer to be on the top. Łóżko jest bardzo wygodne. The bed is very comfortable, czyściutkie, clean, a nad głową mam pieluszkę elektryczną, lampkę elektryczną. Over my head I have an electric little light która przydaje mi się obecnie przy pisaniu. That's coming in very handy now for the writing. Po ulokowaniu się, umyciu się, udałam się do dziennej poli. After settling myself and washing, I went to Jenny i Polly, these are my two girlfriends. One mieszkają 2 kabiny dalej od mojej. They live 2 cabins away from me. A że tam była jeszcze Miss Bloch, która opiekowała się nami w Bremen. With them there is a Miss Bloch. She was apparently an American woman. I don't recall her. Poszłam ją poprosić, żeby wysłała mi pocztówkę, którą napisałam do Erne. I went to ask her to mail a postcard for me to send to this family that I lived with, because they remained still in the DP camp.
Did you imagine that they would come to their daughter and you would all be together again? Was that the plan?
Oh, yes, yes, they did. They did eventually. Następnie wyszłam na pokład. Now był cudowny widok. I went out on the deck. The view was beautiful. Zachód słońca, the sundown, morze, the ocean, a dookoła mewy, którym rzucałyśmy chleb, żeby przyleciały blisko okrętu. What do you call the birds that are?
Seagulls?
The seagulls that came nearby when we threw them some breadcrumbs. They came close to the boat. Z pokładu do kabiny wracałam prawie pół godziny, gdyż niestety razem z Polą błądziłyśmy. It took us a half an hour to get back from the deck to the cabin because we got lost. Trafiliśmy jednak, a że była już godzina 5, udałyśmy na kolację. We found the cabin, and since it was already 5 o'clock, we went for dinner. Jadalnia mieści się naprzeciw naszej kabiny. The dining room is opposite our cabin. Po wejściu, o czym nie chciało się wierzyć, czy to sen, czy też prawdziwa rzeczywistość. When we entered, our eyes couldn't believe it, if this is a dream or it is reality. Stoły nakryte białymi obrusami. The tables were covered with white tablecloth. Poza tym na talerzach babka. On the tables were cake, masło, butter, cukier, marmolada, sugar, marmalade i obok każdego nakrycia mandarynka, an orange. Na kolację było, are you curious to know what we had for dinner that first evening? Na kolację było makaron z sosem. Macaronis with sauce. Mięso, meat, i kartofla w lupie. That's baked potatoes. Plenty of starches. Po kolacji był jeden temat. After dinner there was only one subject. Słowa zachwytu i podziwu. Words of joy and bewilderment. Następnie wyszliśmy na pokład, gdyż okręt miał ruszyć o 7 godziny. Afterwards we went on the deck since the boat was leaving at 7 o'clock. Punktualnie o tym czasie opuściliśmy port. We left exactly at that time. Wszyscy stali na pokładzie i z niecierpliwością przypatrywali się, jak zabierano schodki. Everyone was watching how they were taking away the steps. I wreszcie ruszyliśmy. Finally we went. Oby w szczęśliwą godzinę, in a good hour. No. Spacerowałam jeszcze godzinę na pokładzie, a następnie poszłam z Polą pod tusz. We walked on the deck for a while and then we went to shower. Około 9 położyłam się do łóżka i wnet zasnęłam like the beat. I went to sleep at 9 and fell asleep very hard. Do you want me to continue?
Sure.
Przebudziłam się o godzinie 5. I woke up about 5. gdyż okręt zaczął mocno się kołysać. I woke up about 5 since the boat started to shake, więc oczekiwałam morską chorobę. I expected to get seasick, ale przeszło bez żadnych przygód. But it passed without anything. O 7:30 wstałam, gdyż od 8:30 było śniadanie. I got up at 7:30 since at 8:30 was breakfast. Oczywiście było wyśmienite. Of course it was terrific. Na razie jem tyle, ile mi smakuje. Until now I eat whatever I can. Po śniadaniu udało mi się zwiedzić okręt. After breakfast we went to visit the boat. Stwierdziłam oczywiście, że nasze kabiny są najładniejsze i najwygodniejsze. I found out that our cabins were the nicest. W mojej kabinie jest 12 dziewcząt, zaś u Poli tylko 10, ale tam jest 7-miesięczne dziecko, więc wszystkie są trochę skrępowane. Our cabin is very nice. We have 12 girls. Paula, that's my girlfriend, in her cabin there are only 10, but there is a 7-month-old baby, so things are not so good there. W kabinach B mieszkają kobiety zamężne i samotne od 30 do 40 w kabinie. On deck B, there are mostly married people. And in some of the cabins are 30 to 40 people in one cabin. C and D mieści się już w wodzie. That's cabin C and D are already in the water. Tam mieszkają również kobiety i mężczyźni, a w D tylko mężczyźni. In C, the men and women are in deck D, only men. Tam są okropne warunki. The conditions there are not good. Pomimo wiatraczków elektrycznych jest tu bardzo gorąco. Even though there are fans, electric fans, it's very hot there. I tylko z tego powodu wiele mężczyzn od razu się rozchorowało. I because of that, many got seasick. O godzinie 10 był próbny alarm w razie, nie chcę tego nawet napisać. At 10 o'clock there was a drill, a fire drill. I don't even want to write about it, you know, like it says like in case. I don't want to say anything. Ubraliśmy korki i każdy uda się na pokład, gdzie mieści się łódź ratunkowa. We put on the, what do you call it? The lifesavers, right? And we went on the deck where they have the boats. And they showed us the boats to which boat we are assigned in case of an emergency. No i tutaj spotkałam zbożczowa. I'm just writing that I met somebody that I knew. Po obiedzie, spacerując na pokładzie, słyszę nagle, że mnie ktoś woła. Okazało się, że to Gosowa z Lisowiec. After the lunch, I heard somebody's voice. Somebody was calling me, and there was somebody from our camp that was also on this boat. Jeszcze w maju była funka serna i z powodu strajku dopiero teraz jedzie. She was an older woman who had an affidavit to come. She had relatives here. And I thought that she was here already a long time ago, but I don't know if you recall, there was a boat strike that year. So even though she was waiting since May, she was just leaving now in December with us. Widziało się dużo statków, a nawet duże okręty przyjechało blisko nas. We saw a lot of small boats and many large ones that came close to us. Widziano również dużo miejsc zamieszczonych przez huragan. We saw several places where people apparently threw up. Pasażerowie z pokładu A and B jedzą na pokładzie A, gdzie jedzenie jest podawane przez kelnierów, białych i czarnych. The passengers from the deck A and B eat on deck A, where food is served by waiters. At our table we have nasz stół jest wyjątkowo usługiwany przez rudego, a redhead. Na pokładzie C i D pasażerowie stoją w ogonku po jedzenie. And deck C and D, the passengers have to stand in line for their food. Dorośli dostali dziś z Jointu i Hayasu from the Joint Distribution Committee and the Hayas po $7. The adults received today $7 per person. My zaś otrzymamy gotowe produkty na sumę $2. We youngsters received only products in the sum of $2. Po kolacji było nadzwyczajne wydarzenie. After dinner there was a beautiful view, an exceptional view. Z daleka zobaczyliśmy wybrzeże angielskie. We saw from a distance the English, the outline of England, I guess. It's we saw England. Byliśmy blisko portu Dover.
Dover, the White Cliffs of Dover.
Yeah. Okręt stanął, zaczęto sygnalizować, więc przyjechała motorówka i jeden oficer wysiadł i pojechał do portu. The boat stopped and there were some signals. A small boat came over and one of the officers went into port. Jesteśmy obecnie w kanale La Manche. We are now in the Canal La Manche. Okręt mocno się kołyszy. The boat is shaking. Przepowiadają, że tu każdy musi chorować z powodu wstrząsów. They are predicting that here everybody has to get seasick. Zobaczę, co przyniesie noc. I'll see what the night will bring and tomorrow, jutrzejszy dzień. Na razie czuję się dobrze, oby tak dalej. Meanwhile, I'm feeling fine and I hope so and further. Jedno mnie trochę martwi. Niedawno wywiesili ogłoszenie, że okręt Europa dziś utonął. I am worried because they informed us that the boat Europa sank. Pola mnie pocieszała, że jeśli z rana był szturm i Europa utonęła, to teraz może będzie spokojnie i szczęśliwie dojedziemy. My friend Paula was trying to console me, and she said that since that boat sank and the storm was wherever that boat was, the storm has passed and everything will be all right. In the cabin w kabinie jest już ciemno. And the cabin is already dark. Wszystkie dziewczynki śpią już. All the girls are asleep. A opiekunka weszła zobaczyć, czy nie ma... the lady who was in charge of us teenagers came in to see if there are no boys in the cabin. To wszystko było dziś. That's all for today. Good night.
What
That's
a beautiful letter.
I can't believe that I wrote this. Well, now sort of wish I had written more, but I guess it was not meant to be. So it will have to do.
Was that young woman waiting in New York for you?
Well, that was the trip. After this letter, I got very, very seasick. And I thought I'll never get off that boat. But I made it. And we arrived in New York, and we were taken to a place where some of my friends that had relatives were picked up by their relatives, and others were placed with families. Since these people had asked for me, I was willing to go. At least I had an idea who they were, because at that time there were a lot of people from New York that came to that place where we were staying in New York, and there were several families that wanted to adopt me and wanted me to stay with them. But I didn't know what to do. I had my close friends that remained here, and strange how some people that were born here at that time said to me, "You are going to Kansas City? The Indians are there, it's wilderness." But I had faith in these people, and I spoke to the social worker, and she said, "Look, you'll have a social worker in Kansas City that will be working with you. And if for some reason you don't like staying with this family, either they'll place you with another family, or maybe they'll send you back to New York and we'll place you here." So I really felt that I had nothing to lose. And New Year's Eve, December 31st, I left New York for Kansas City with the social worker. And they were waiting for me at the airport. And I came to, that's how I arrived in Kansas City. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, because they just happened to have been the most wonderful people you could ever meet. And I was like a daughter to them. And they were just like, I mean, they never adopted me officially because I felt I was too old for that. And all I wanted when I got there, I wanted to go to work. I didn't know any English, but I wanted to go work as a waitress, and I just couldn't think of being taken in by a family and cared for no reason, a stranger. But they were, well, thank God she's still alive. He has passed on since. And they had two boys that were younger than I. And there was one thing that she said to me, and that made such an impression on me that from that day on, a lot changed. She said, if this would have happened to us, I would have hoped that somebody would have taken care of my children. So that's why we want you to be like our child. And that's how I was. It was a wonderful, I still went through a lot even there emotionally, but they were very understanding. I used to get moody and go into my room and cry. And I felt guilty that I was so well off, and that when I was after I was happy, I used to get very depressed. Why did I allow myself to be so happy? I had no right. But they insisted, and I was glad in a nice way. I went to school. I worked very hard, and when I first got there, I got sick. That was the first thing after a few days. But then I went to, started with the 8th grade. And I graduated the 8th grade that June and went into high school. And I made high school in 2.5 years. And then I wanted to be a nurse. So I took a test at the University of Kansas. It was a whole day test, and I passed. And the highest, I was in constant touch with the social worker, and they were going to pay for my education. And I was accepted at that school, and I looked forward to it. And then I got the news that the family that I stayed with, by the way, their name is Rappaport, and they said that they are willing to pay. And I just didn't feel that I wanted them to go to that expense. So I decided not to go to nursing school. I went to work and I went to college at night. But that didn't last too long, because once I made some money. The first money I saved, I took a trip to New York. And that's when I went. So I stayed with my girlfriends, the 2 sisters. One of them had gotten married. And I met all my other friends. And they didn't have the same opportunities as I. They had to go to work right away. They didn't go to school. But they had more of a social life, and New York was, I looked at New York differently than when I first arrived. So I went back to Kansas City, and I said, I'm going to leave. I'm going to New York. My 2 girlfriends, we were like 3 sisters after the war, and one of them had gotten married. So the other one said, why don't you come and we'll live together? She had rented a room with a family. So I went back to Kansas City, and he was very upset that I was leaving. He said, well, did something happen? Are you unhappy here? But that wasn't at all. It's just, I felt that I needed, a different life by that time. So, but she was very understanding. She said, look, if you were my own child and you wanted to leave, I couldn't hold you back. But she says, the door will always be open. In case you don't like it, you can always come back. And I borrowed $50 from them, went to New York, got a job right away, and the first $50 I saved, I sent it back. Matter of fact, I sent it in a money order, which they didn't cash in a long time, or a bank check, I believe. And the bank called me, how come the check wasn't cashed? And I came to New York in the fall, And in the spring the following year, I met my husband. And that's another story. And we got married the following December. But meanwhile, my girlfriend also got married. She moved to California. We are constantly in touch. And as far as the family from Kansas City, this is my family. They have 2 sons, and we have been very close all these years. And since I moved to New York, I have been going back to Kansas City periodically, and she comes to New York, she stays with us, she stays with their sons, and the very close relationship.
What do you think made you come today?
What made me come were several things. I felt that I was everything was inside that never came out. I mean, even today, I don't want to get emotional, so certain subjects I will not touch, because you can't really describe emotions. You can't describe feelings. I'm not a jealous person at all, except when it comes to family. You know, that I missed all these years. And I felt guilty that I spared myself from not going to Israel or to Washington, because everybody that I spoke to told me that it was a very emotional thing. I made myself watch on television the gathering in Washington. It takes an awful lot out of me. I can't describe it, what it feels like inside. It's like cutting with knives. And, you know, as the years go by, they keep on talking about this generation is going, and I thought, I've got to leave something. Not for my sake,